Previously on Transformers University, we dove into Season 2 of the original Generation 1 cartoon, and now we are coming to the end of Season 2 with the final 5 episodes right now on Transformers University. Hello, my friend, and welcome to episode 43 of Transformers University. Today we are wrapping up Season 2. We're wrapping up the final episodes of 1985 and a few that aired in 1986 from the original cartoon in Season 2 before we make our way to 1986, the Transformers movie, and a whole lot more as we continue on this journey. But first, while we're on this journey, I want to thank a couple of our new enrolled students over at our Patreon, patreon.com/TFU.INFO. First up, Jeremy Dennis of the Transmissions podcast. You've heard him here before. He has signed up at the junior level. And Mr. John Levengood, our newest pledge, at the senior level. So if you'd like to sign up, you can sign up for as little as $1 a month. That'll get you freshman enrollment. That'll let you hear this episode at least 24 hours ahead of its publication elsewhere. And it'll get you some inside scoop on what I'm up to with the show, some exclusive podcasts, some exclusive video content, and all sorts of other things. Speaking of video content, as we wrap up 2018 in real life and wrap up 1985 here, I do want to encourage you all to swing on by to the YouTube channel, youtube.com/TFU.INFO, and subscribe. But enough housekeeping for the moment. Let's jump into the first of the 5 episodes we're going to talk about today. And that is episode 45, overall episode 61, Cosmic Rust by Paul Davids. Now, this was the final episode to air in 1985, and we actually, going through these 5 episodes, they aired not just out of order from these 5, but out of order from some of the other episodes we've already covered. But on to Paul Davids, the writer on the show. This is the first of 4 episodes that he would go on to write for the Transformers series. He's also written for Bionic 6, Cops, Garbage Pail Kids, and of note here is that he was the production coordinator on the Transformers series. So I'm guessing the in-house folks threw him a bone and gave him a chance to show his writing chops back in 1985. Now, this episode starts with the Decepticons flying through space on Astrotrain. They find a planet that is emblazoned with the Autobot symbol. On that planet, they find a building covered with an inscription in ancient Autobot. And Starscream finds a way to interface.
Starscream! Keep your grubby fingers off that! It could be a booby trap!
What trap? This is a prehistoric communication device, you uneducated dolt!
And if you heard last episode, then you'll be glad to know that in this continuity, Starscream knows the meaning of the word dolt. This machine, it reveals a hologram message from the past.
If Cybertron be your home, far away, never roam. Hear my message, listen and fear. Danger comes, the end is near. Just like us, you soon will rust. All shall be turned to dust.
The Decepticons ignore the warning and explore. They find this giant mechanical lightning bug, which turns out to be some sort of weapon. And of course, the Decepticons decide to take it and leave with it. As they do, they board Astrotrain, and he is followed by an asteroid. Upon realizing they're being followed by this asteroid, Megatron uses the lightning bug heat ray to blow up the asteroid, but gets hit with some of the shrapnel from the explosion. Back at Decepticon headquarters, Starscream removes an asteroid chunk and finds some rust.
What is this on my chest hole?
It looks like some sort of rust.
That is That's ridiculous. We are rust-proof.
You know, that line always makes me wonder exactly what is a chest hole. Because Megatron reacts as if he's supposed to have a hole in his chest, and there just happens to be rust in it. In New York City, Perceptor is being honored for developing something called Corostop, which the Autobots are going to use to coat the world's monuments. But they only have enough right now to coat the Statue of Liberty. And just to jump into the real world tie-in here. So back around 1984 and 1985, growing up in New York, you were like I did, you were well aware the Statue of Liberty was under a I don't want to say reconstruction, a restoration is probably the best way to put it. There was a restoration, a refurbishing of Lady Liberty going on, and they certainly taught it in school, and we certainly saw it on TV in commercials such as this one.
I have welcomed people from all nations, all stations of life to our shores. Your parents, grandparents, and I gave them a dream of hope, freedom, and opportunity. A dream that shaped the courage and destiny of 3 generations of Americans. A dream that forged this mighty nation. But now, I need your help. Time and the elements are destroying me. Corrosion has weakened my body. I am in desperate need of help. Or soon, I will become a symbol of shame and decay. America, you are my dream, and I am yours. If you still believe in me, save me.
Keep the torch lit. Send your contribution to The Lady, Box 1986, New York, or call 1-800-THE-LADY.
And as the restoration was nearing its completion, getting ready for the statue's 100th birthday in 1986, that didn't stop corporate America from making sure that they put their mark on it as well.
This buzz for the crew, restoring America's pride in liberty.
This buzz for you. You know America takes pride in what you do.
Yeah, just for you, that distinctively clean, crisp taste that says Budweiser.
For all you do, this buzz for you.
But back to the story. So Megatron, back at Decepticon headquarters, is hideous. He is hideous. He is rusting more, and he orders that Perceptor be kidnapped. While the Autobots are restoring the statue with some Corostop, Perceptor is off on his own and is attacked by some Stunticons, but not just regular Stunticons, jet skiing Stunticons. They capture Perceptor, and the Aerobots pursue but fail to rescue him. At Decepticon headquarters, Perceptor, he strikes a deal with a very rusty Megatron. New weapon, the lightning bug, the heat ray as it's called in this episode as well, in exchange for the cure. Perceptor then finds out that Megatron is infected with the titular cosmic rust.
You've been infected by a metallic plague, Megatron.
Impossible! Only organic forms of life can be infected by disease.
This is a rare metallic infection. Legend has it, it wiped out entire races of robots, like the Black Plague did to humans. It's cosmic rust.
I think it's great that Megatron either hints that the Transformers here are part organic in some way, or that only organics get diseases. But this rust is accelerated by the lightning bug heat ray as Megatron's hand just falls off. Perceptor picks it up and rubs some Corostop on it and cures the rust. We cut back to Autobot Base, where Megatron decides to FaceTime Optimus Prime. He is certainly much shinier and non-rusty in this image, and he tells Optimus he is leaving Perceptor in Fox Creek Canyon, which is 3 miles from base. Now, while there is no real Fox Creek Canyon, there is a Fox Creek Pass, which is a mountain pass located at the Teton Range in Grand Teton National Park in the state of Wyoming. And this pass actually can be accessed from the east via the Death Canyon Trail. Now, speaking of impending death, Megatron has rigged Perceptor not just with a bomb that is set to go off, but with cosmic rust as well. Now, the bomb is set to go off via Perceptor's microscope mode. This is a pretty devious plan. So he has Perceptor locked in microscope mode. He has positioned his microscope in a way that the bomb is underneath the lens, and the lens is mere minutes away from receiving direct light from the sun, thus igniting the bomb. Optimus Prime must choose to either rescue Perceptor or be infected with the cosmic rust. And of course, Optimus, being Optimus, decides to save Perceptor, and they return to Autobot base, where Teltran 1 tells us a bit about cosmic rust.
The germs originated on a planet called Antilla. At the dawn of time, there was a thriving Autobot civilization. Then dreaded asteroids began falling from the sky to spread cosmic rust. No cure was ever found. The 13th Legion, the Lost Legion, was decimated by that malevolent scourge.
Now, there's some important things in that little bit of audio. The name of the planet, Antilla, which we'll get to in a little bit, but also the Autobots colonizing other worlds. That is something that shows up in later Transformers series, such as Transformers Cybertron, and then the IDW run of Transformers comics. Also, the 13th Legion, and again in IDW there are 13 colonies, and a bit more on that in a little bit. Now, the Corostop is the only cure for cosmic rust, and the key ingredient X, we found out a little bit earlier in this episode that there is no more ingredient X in the universe. Wheeljack has an idea.
We could try the matter duplicator. The matter duplicator. But it doesn't work. It never worked.
It's like Optimus and Wheeljack are Rocky and Bullwinkle. That trick never works. So, the Decepticons, they decide to attack Autobot base with the heat ray to accelerate the rust and infect the rest of the Autobots. Quickly, Perceptor and Wheeljack head to the matter duplicator, which has an entire room. It has an entire room. It's something that's never worked, but they dedicated an entire space for it. That blows my mind a bit. And of course, this time, it works. We find out from the Decepticons spying that the Autobots have found a way to duplicate Ingredient X and make more Corostop, and they're headed to New York to the Statue of Liberty to get a sample of the Corostop. The Decepticons decide to head there too. Megatron, Soundwave, and Rumble, the blue one, along with Menasor. Menasor will be the one to fire the heat ray at the Statue of Liberty, but the Autobots are hiding in the statue and fire on the Decepticons. The aerial bots arrive and cause Menasor to drop the heat ray just before combining, and Superion destroys the heat ray. From there, the Decepticons retreat, the Autobots are cured, and they celebrate at the statue. Now, that is a lot of action for one episode. And like I said before, there's some interesting continuations of this concept of both cosmic rust and Antilla and the colonies in future Transformer stories. And for more on that, I'm going to toss it over to Charles, a.k.a. Big C, from the Transmissions Podcast.
This is Charles, a.k.a. Big C, from the Transmissions Podcast. I'm going to talk about another G1 episode, Cosmic Rust. This was another fun episode for me. It was interesting revisiting this. I actually hadn't watched this episode in several years, so it was a bit of a surprise hearing a particular name of a planet in this episode. If you're familiar with the IDW comics, which just ended its current Transformers universe run, the IDW Transformers universe recently introduced Unicron, and Unicron turned out to be a planet called Antilla, which was an alien planet that had been conquered by warring Cybertronians in the ancient past, and the alien species there created Unicron as a doomsday device that turned their planet into a giant monster to get revenge on the Cybertronians. So that was the origin of Unicron in the IDW comics. So it's interesting here to see that the planet Antilla is an ancient Autobot colony in the episode of Cosmic Rust. So once again, John Barber doing a deep pull from past Transformers fiction and lore and incorporating that into the new IDW continuity. So that was just an interesting little tidbit to see in this episode. But the episode in general was a fun one. It's focused on Perceptor and his scientific knowledge and expertise. That's what drives this episode. He's invented Corostop, an anti-rust agent, and Autobots, being benevolent folks that they are, they're just using it to coat the Earth's monuments with this alloy so that they can be preserved for all time. So the Autobots are just swell guys. They want to help out the human race to preserve their history. So that was interesting. And then Megatron contracting a rust disease was really interesting. It made me think also of the old G1 comics, where they had another disease in the comics called scraplets, and it was a similar idea where it was a disease that actually affected living metal beings, so living robots. In the comics, the scraplets were actually tiny little robots that were, it was the same idea of kind of microorganisms, but actually robotic microorganisms that transformed into little nuts and bolts and screws, but embedded themselves into the Autobots and Decepticons as parasitic organisms. And here, Cosmic Rust is the actual organisms are not quite so exciting, but they're just little parasites that feed off of the Autobots and Decepticons bodies. So it's a similar idea. So it seems like the writers of the cartoon had a similar idea to the Bob Budiansky writing in the comics, and they just diverged in different ways. One thing that also struck me about this episode is that Megatron goes from just kind of mustache twirling Saturday morning cartoon villain to like kind of he legit commits some war crimes here. Like he uses germ warfare. He infects Perceptor with this disease and then uses it to spread to the other Autobots. Then on top of that, he has his heat ray weapon that can actually spread the disease quicker, and he turns that on the Autobots too. So I mean, he's really kind of nasty here, actually, causing germ warfare and actually trying to exacerbate this disease and make the Autobots suffer as much as possible. So it's a little disturbing to see how nasty Megatron got here in this episode. Of course, no one really remarks on it, but. And his plan is thwarted as always, but it just struck me how this is definitely violating the Geneva Convention in this episode, especially after Perceptor cured Megatron's disease in the first place. I mean, that's gratitude for you, huh? I mean, I guess you shouldn't expect much from Megatron, but to actually turn the disease on the Autobots and try to really murder them in a nasty way. I mean, yeah, it's war, but for some reason that just crosses the line with me. I don't know why, but But yeah, this is a fun episode, and of course, at the end we get another Superion Menasor fight. That's always fun to see the season 2 later day combiners joining the fight. So the aerial bots and Stunticons there. It's so it was a fun episode. Minus the germ warfare and war crimes.
And of course, you can catch Charles, aka Big C, along with the rest of the Transmissions gang over on the Transmissions podcast, available just about everywhere you listen to this show. So search it out and give it a listen. It's a good show. Yeah, Megatron in this episode is particularly sinister, and we'll find out in not this next episode, but the one after that. There are some brutal fight scenes due in this season that you just don't quite expect from the Transformers cartoon prior to the movie. So moving on, we're going to touch on Season 2, Episode 46, overall Episode 62, Starscream's Brigade. And this episode aired in January of 1986, and I know we haven't gotten into 1986 yet, but for consistency's sake, we're going to keep the end of Season 2 within this 1985 conversation we've been having for quite a while. This episode's written by Michael Charles Hill. You'll last remember him from the episode The Gambler, a few episodes back on this show. And for more on this episode, I'm going to toss it over to Christabella of Steel City Bots.
Hey guys, it's Christabella from Steel City Bots, and we're here tonight, or today, or whenever you happen to be listening to this, to talk about Starscream's Brigade from Season 2 of Transformers. If memory serves, the episode started off with a flashback to World War II, and somewhere in the South Pacific. If memory serves, it was Guadalcanal. I think that's how you say that? Yeah, that's how you say that. Where we see some Chekhov's guns, vehicles get crashed or otherwise destroyed, where they just remain for roughly 40 years. We then take a cut to Decepticon HQ, where the married couple, Starscream and Megatron, what's the difference? Are having a lover's spat over the fact that Megatron favors Shockwave, and of course, it's Shockwave. Who wouldn't favor Shockwave? He's so perfect. But I digest.
Shockwave this, Shockwave that. All I ever hear about is how great Shockwave is.
Of course, it's Megatron and Starscream, so of course, Starscream's gonna just shoot Megatron right there in the back and declare himself the new leader, which I think happens, every other episode, or at least every other episode, I believe. Of course, Megatron, being Megatron, he gets up really quickly and beats the tar out of Starscream. So he tries to get away, because, G1 Starscream, like most Starscreams, is a coward. Megatron, pew pew, or maybe more like phoom, because I love how his blaster sounds in G1, but that's neither here nor there. He shoots him down, and Megatron gets Laserbeak to carry him away, and where he happens to get dumped at Guadalcanal. Apparently a good place for dumping unwanted vehicles, but anyway. With that humiliation, having suffered that humiliation, Starscream quickly discovers the remnants of those same vehicles we saw crashed in the opening scene, which he decides to use to create his own army of 5 vehicles. Because, yes, 5 wrecked World War II army vehicles against the entire evil forces of the Decepticons. It's gonna work out in your favor there. Good work there, Patton. Anyway, so of course, to do this, he needs something, a MacGuffin, which just so happens in this episode to be personality components. He forces his way past the guards at the space bridge and goes to Cybertron, where he breaks into which is an area that seems to be the HR department of the Decepticons. I mean, it's like, seriously, it is like, this is where Transformers The Office would be, because there's filing cabinets and everything. It's weird. Anyway, he finds those components, which I think were like pink cubes, which were like I think kind of like tiny energon cubes. He gets those components and returns to Earth and puts them inside of the vehicles, which immediately turn into robots. Which, okay, I just want to say, I can buy that this is a thing. You can put the components in a car, and it will turn into a robot. Sure, okay. Even though we saw that in order for Megatron to do this, when he built the Stunticons, he had to like take them apart and like add robot bits, and yeah. So consistency. What's that? What is this word? But so that, okay, I'll buy that. Sure. G1, it's goofy, it's fun, sure. But that only they get repaired is what I'm trying to say. Like they go from junker destroyed vehicle to robot to a pristine version of the same said vehicle. Now, I know what it sounds like. I know it sounds like I'm trashing on the Combaticons, and I am not. The Combaticons are by far and away my favorite combiner team. And I'm going on a tangent here. I apologize. I'll try and keep this quick. Some of the first Transformers we got growing up, they were my brother's first, admittedly, were the RID Combaticons. So I've always loved the Combaticons. You too, right, bro? Yeah? Yeah, we've always loved the Combaticons. So I am in no way harping on them, trying to bash on them. It's just this scene, I keep trying to apply real-world logic to G1, and I shouldn't. It hurts my brain. But anyway, moving along. I apologize. So, they transform, and they're kind of mad at Starscream because they kind of think their bodies look like crap. And yeah, I mean, I don't know what their original ones look like, but I'm assuming that compared to what they originally looked like and they look like now, they're probably right. And so, of course, they threaten to beat the ever-loving scrap out of Starscream until he shows them, or reveals the truth, that their bodies do not yet contain energy absorbers.
The fact that I have not equipped you with energy absorbers. Without them, you cannot refuel. No energy, no life.
And now, this is where we get to something that's interesting. We, see Jazz and Cliffjumper are making public appearances at the unveiling of an Optimus Prime memorial. That's interesting that it's a memorial to Optimus. Some serious foreshadowing going on there. Like, I did not catch that anytime I've ever watched it. I did not catch that it was a memorial. Like, that didn't click. Where Starscream and his brigade, they attack, and Jazz and Cliffjumper get sucked into Vortex. Oh, I should probably have mentioned the Combaticons' names. We have Vortex, who is a helicopter, Blastoff, who is a space shuttle for some reason, which, I mean, I'm not going to tangent. We have Brawl, who is a tank, who, I like Brawl. Then there's Swindle. I think Swindle may be my favorite of the Combaticons. I have my own personal headcanon there. If you want to know about that, ask me on Twitter. Then you have the leader, Onslaught. Oh, I forgot to mention alt modes. Brawl Vortex is a helicopter. I think I already said that. Brawl is a tank. Swindle is a jeep, and Onslaught is I don't know what that's called. It's a gun. I just call it gun flatbed truck thing. Which I've never even seen one of those in real life. Like, anyway. So they get those two get sucked into Vortex. And yeah, because apparently 2 full-size Autobots can fit inside of a helicopter. Reasons. So we cut back to the Decepticon base, where Shockwave has informed Megatron that the Combaticons' personality component thingies are missing, and they assume it's the Autobots, because, I mean, kind of reasonable, though I am questioning why there's no security, because that's essentially, like, what? That was, like, a maximum security prison, essentially, for Decepticons, so why there's not even, like, you know, a surveillance camera? I don't know. The Autobots, while that's happening, they've learned of the attack at the memorial. Again, memorial. I stress that. A memorial is something you do after someone's dead, not before. And they assume it's Megatron. So when the Decepticons attack, the Autobots are confused when Megatron demands the personality components. And Optimus, you know, he's like, give me my dudes. And I guess for some reason Megatron decides that this must be Starscream's fault. So once the Decepticons have fled, the Autobots go and they consult Teletran 1 for the information on these components.
Renegade Decepticons are political prisoners detained on Cybertron. Under direct orders from Megatron, Shockwave had their personality components removed from their structures. The structures were subsequently destroyed. Until yesterday, the personality components were stored in the Decepticon Detention Center.
At this point, Starscream and the Combaticons they attack the other Decepticons while they're trying to fill up. And since they only got partially filled, Megatron and his guys they gotta run away again, which lets Starscream capture Dirge and Ramjet.
Look, 2 more Transformers to add to our collection.
Which means that they now have 4 energy absorbers. So Megatron he moves against Starscream and his troops, and during the battle, Megatron pulls out a Devastator. But that's when Starscream pulls out a Bruticus! Woo! Bruticus! Best combiner! Bruticus is great. Every time he's on screen, I'm so happy. Bruticus is like my son. There are many that fit that description, but anyway, Bruticus beats the crap out of Devastator, and then Bruticus grabs Megatron like all King Kong style, and Starscream makes him acknowledge him as the new leader. The Autobots use this distraction to rescue their guys, while the Stunticons get there, and so they combine, and the Menasor, who goes all One Punch Man on my boy Bruticus, and it creates a crater in the ground, which Megatron grabs Starscream by the throat because, you know, they're robots, so of course grabbing them by the throat they won't be able to breathe. What? And they banish them from Earth, putting them on they're put on Astro Train and left on an asteroid. Before that, though, Megatron does the way he says Bruticus in this. Megatron does it's hilarious. It's mocking and it's great. He doesn't say Bruticus. He says Bruticus.
No, Starscream, not Bruticus.
Yeah, so they get dumped on the asteroid. Starscream swears vengeance, and we get our end credits. But I just want to go over some of my thoughts. I've always loved combiners. Combiners have been just my favorite thing, and Bruticus the Combaticons are by far my favorite combiner team. Just this is probably among one of my more favorite episodes of G1. Just for that. All in all, I think it was just, you know, a really good episode. Not the best. There's certainly some animation errors. That's G1. That's to be expected. I did enjoy that they showed like the World War II scene, like right at the very beginning. Just, that adds a little bit to it. I don't know. I just kind of liked it. Combiners will always have a special place in my heart, and episodes where combiners are introduced especially so. Until next time, this has been Christabella. Bayonara.
And you can catch Chris and the rest of the gang from Steel City Bots over on the Nerdy Geek Talk Network, available just about everywhere you listen to this podcast. And check it out, because there are a bunch of 25 and under Transformers fans who do have a very unique perspective on the brand. So a couple things I wanted to note in this episode that Chris didn't touch on. Just a couple of small things. Megatron and Starscream's fight for leadership. We talked about foreshadowing with the Optimus Prime Memorial statue, but this fight between Megatron and Starscream, especially given that the episode aired in 1986, even though these characters debuted earlier in Aerial Assault, whereas this episode chronologically probably takes place before that, certainly takes place before that. It's interesting to see the Starscream Megatron fight being drummed up here, because it's important heading into 1986. Another thing, when Megatron banishes Starscream, Laserbeak carries him off. How strong is Laserbeak? Starscream turns into an F-14. That is a big plane. Laserbeak is a cassette-sized bird. So you do the math there. Also worth noting, and this comes from the folks over at TF.Wiki, the original shooting script actually called for the Combaticons to be in rusty, battered versions of themselves while waiting for their energy absorbers. That probably also explains a little bit of the World War II wrecks becoming modern vehicles, but it is a little odd because Blastoff does start as a bomber before turning into a space shuttle, and Vortex does start off as a Japanese Zero before turning into a helicopter. We mentioned in Cosmic Rust about Megatron being pretty dark in that episode. Starscream here is essentially getting compliance from the Combaticons by starving them. And finally, if you like combiners, this episode is a good one, because there is a great combiner fight, including the one between Bruticus and Devastator.
Bruticus, devastate, Devastator.
Also worth noting here is that the end of this episode ends with just the Decepticons fighting each other. The Autobots really don't do anything. And technically, Menasor saves the day. Now, this episode isn't really the first part of a two-parter, but these two episodes do go hand in hand, much like Child's Play and The Gambler before it. Revenge of Bruticus, which is the next episode we'll talk about, Season 2, Episode 47, overall Episode 63 by Larry Strauss, does pick up right where this episode, the Starscream's Brigade, left off. And this one starts with the Combaticons and Starscream stranded on the asteroid. They're all running low on energy, and Starscream decides to transform and leave. Blastoff, however, is towing the asteroid towards Cybertron. On Cybertron, Shockwave is testing out his Sentinel guards, which is a new design on the Sentinels that we saw in the search for Alpha Trion. Here, we have a brutal fight.
Oh, that's brutal.
Between the Combaticons, who decide to land on Cybertron, form Bruticus. They grab Shockwave, King Kong style, and Shockwave transforms and shoots Bruticus in the face.
Oh, that's brutal.
Bruticus falls over onto a bunch of Sentinels, which he then cuts up using Vortex's helicopter blade located on his shoulder.
Oh, that's brutal.
For some reason, Shockwave is stuck in gun mode, so Bruticus picks him up and uses him to shoot all of the Sentinels, then loads the transformed Shockwave into his back-mounted cannons, and fires him off into space. Now, before we go in further into the story, this is one of those things that actually has been recreated in modern times. So in the 2016 Transformers toy line, Combiner Wars, they made a Legends scale figure of Shockwave, a smaller figure, that the combined form of Bruticus can hold and can mount on his back. So, little trivia tidbit there for you. On Earth, the Insecticons, they're eating a city, because what else do Insecticons do? And the Autobots arrive, those Autobots being Trax, Prowl, Sideswipe, and Optimus Prime. The Insecticons spread to another city, and Optimus Prime calls in the Protectobots. This is their first appearance, and there is no explanation or origin for them. According to TF Wiki, so the Combiners generally would get an origin episode, but these were introduced too late into the production run of Season 2 with the movie going on and everything else that they couldn't really write them up a proper introduction. So they just kind of shoehorned them into this episode and one other. Back at Autobot headquarters, Spike and Perceptor are watching space, and in space, though not under the eye of those two, Shockwave collides with Starscream. I mean, what are the odds of that? But he does, and Shockwave and Starscream chat, realize that the Combaticons have taken over Cybertron, and Shockwave is going to ride Starscream back to Cybertron on the outside. Now, on Cybertron, the Combaticons are planning some revenge on Megatron and the planet Earth, and they're planning on making planet Earth collide with the sun using Onslaught's backpack guns to somehow fire on Earth and move it out of its orbit. At the city where the Insecticons are attacking, the Protectobots have cleared the humans, and the Autobots begin extermination. Perceptor informs Optimus of the Earth moving closer to the sun, and Optimus decides it's a good time to head to the Space Bridge, go to Cybertron, and do something about it. But before he can, Shrapnel steals the control mechanism to the Space Bridge and burrows underground. Back on Cybertron, Shockwave uses some holograms, particularly gargoyles, to wear down the Combaticons and drain them of their energy. Shockwave and Starscream then discover the Combaticons' plans, but before Shockwave can start to reverse it, Starscream shoots him in the back because he thinks this is a pretty good plan. Starscream then FaceTimes with a Megatron to rub it in, and then the Combaticons realize the ruse of the gargoyles and walk in on both Shockwave and Starscream fighting and imprison them both. On Earth, the temperature's rising, fires are everywhere, and this sounds terribly familiar in 2018. However, everyone happens to stumble on the Insecticons at the same time with the control panel.
Oh no! There's the control panel! But the Insecticons have chewed it up!
Dun dun dun! Foiled by hungry Insecticons once again. But Perceptor realizes, as the Insecticons flee without the control panel, that he can fix it, but he's going to need some parts. Optimus Prime decides that he will donate some parts if Megatron does as well. Megatron agrees, but has some pretty severe instructions for Ramjet.
Ramjet, if this Autobot quack does anything suspicious, shatter his lenses from the inside.
Man, like I said, brutal.
Oh, that's brutal.
Back in the cities of Earth, the Protectobots are keeping the humans cool by putting them in the freezer at Metro Meat Pacing. Yes, Pacing. I think there's a letter missing. The Autobots and Decepticons, they team up and go to Cybertron. As they are walking around, they free Starscream and Shockwave before fighting the Combaticons and the Sentinel Guard. The Combaticons form Bruticus, and we find out, much like the aerial bots, Bruticus is an angry teenager.
Bruticus hates Cybertron. Bruticus hates you all.
Bruticus no have to listen to you. You not Bruticus real dad. And we find out that Starscream has built in a failsafe in order to stop Bruticus.
There are 3 spots on his back. Hit them all and he's deactivated.
And that spot is just normally covered by Bruticus's shoulder cannons and backpack, which are what are moving Earth towards the sun. Prime takes those 3 spots out quickly and disables Bruticus. And finally, after 63 episodes, Sideswipe actually does something and moves Earth back towards its orbit. The Decepticons decide it's only right if they destroy Bruticus and do so in front of the Autobots before letting the Autobots go home. And interesting voice change here. So Sideswipe and Prowl are both voiced by Michael Bell, but Michael Bell's voice tends to be fairly similar from character to character. And here we hear Prowl and then Sideswipe talking to one another as they leave. And Prowl is most certainly voiced by Michael Bell. And in this clip, it appears that Corey Burton is actually voicing Sideswipe.
I still don't trust Megatron.
Yeah. Why did he just let us leave to rejoin our friends on Earth without even a blast for goodbye?
And finally, we find out that Megatron and Starscream have a secret plan to reprogram Bruticus, that he hasn't been destroyed, and that in the eyes of Megatron, Starscream has been redeemed. And that takes us to Season 2, Episode 48, overall Episode 64, Masquerade by Donald F. Glute. This episode actually aired in 1985, long before any of the episodes we've talked about in this podcast. So before Cosmic Rust, the first episode we talked about today, but also before War Dawn, which we spoke about a few episodes back. In this episode, Megatron, once again, is building his MacGuffin. They don't actually name it, but he does send the Stunticons out for parts. Wild Rider and Breakdown, they steal laser lenses. Dead End and Dragstrip steal an experimental generator. And Motormaster steals, quote, the world's biggest and most perfect ruby. The Autobots catch wind and Inferno, Grapple, and Hoist head out and stop Wild Rider and Breakdown, including a little bit of punnery.
A near miss deserves a couple of near missiles!
Dragstrip and Dead End are stopped by Warpath and Trax, while Motormaster takes on Bumblebee, Optimus Prime, and Blaster. Optimus needs to play a game of chicken with Motormaster. The two collide head-on, but Optimus wins. They take the Stunticons back to the Autobot base as prisoners, and at the base, news of the first robbery includes an interview with the first victim.
And at first, I thought those driverless cars were Autobots. Wild, huh, Optimus? Stunticons mistaken for Autobots?
Yeah, real wild, Spike. In fact, so wild that it happened back in the Key to Vector Sigma, which you can hear a few episodes back as well. Optimus has a plan, and that plan includes some camouflage paint and a holographic projector. Here, we see Jazz and Sideswipe get painted. Windcharger gets a disguise via the hologram, and the Autobots' plan is underway, and the 4 disguises are explained by Ratchet, who, in this case, is not being voiced by his usual voice actor, Don Messick, but instead voiced by series voice director Wally Burr.
They're ready, Optimus. The new Stunticons. Breakdown, alias Sideswipe. Dead End, alias Jazz. Wild Rider, alias Windcharger. And Dragstrip?
Dragstrip? A.K.A. Mirage.
And rounding out the Stunticons, Optimus Prime is disguised as Motormaster. The Autobots disguised as Stunticons then sneak into the canyon where the Decepticons are building their weapon, and Starscream is instantly suspicious. Back at Autobot headquarters, the Stunticons find a way to escape their prison and escape the base and head out as Menasor to warn Megatron. Megatron has completed building his super ray gun thing, and the real Menasor arrives, and unlike previous episodes, like a Prime Problem, this one is not going to be decided with a race. Fake Menasor, in order to prove he is real, combines as well, and the Menasors fight. And in this, we find out that Windcharger is faking the combination using his magnetic powers, and for some reason, Mirage is somehow creating Menasor's face, which means he has Hound's holographic powers. And it's interesting to note here because those got swapped in the cartoon, but in some of the ancillary fiction that we've talked about, like the coloring books and some other things, sometimes Mirage has the holographic abilities and Hound has the turning invisible abilities. But eventually, during this fight, the Autobots fall apart and lose their disguises. Megatron starts firing his new special laser made out of the pieces that the Stunticons had stolen previously, but something's wrong with it.
Machine appears unstable. Suggest abandoning it. Suggestion noted and ignored.
And way to ignore. Some advice from a trusted advisor, Megatron. Of course, the MacGuffin machine explodes just as Autobot reinforcements arrive, and the Decepticons flee, and we find out that Ironhide had sabotaged the Ruby before the Autobots had left the base. Now, for a little bit more insight into this episode, I tapped a good friend of mine, and that would be my buddy Dave from D Squared Productions. You may remember his song for Heavy Metal War way back at the beginning of this podcast's life. You may be familiar with some of his work as of right now. For those of you who are 18 and older, he is nominated with some prestigious company for an AVN award for his musical work in the adult film Hamilton.
Hey, trans lovers, D Squared here. My buddy Anthony asked me to put together some thoughts on the Masquerade episode that aired at the end of season 2, right before the movie came out. And if you remember the movie, I don't want to spoil too much, but a lot of people died. And the Stunticons in this episode that are featured, I'm so surprised didn't make the cut or get cut because they're terrible. They used to perform stunts, I guess, via control from Megatron, but he's abandoned that completely, and I guess he just needed more people to help him rob stuff. So he sends them after lenses. He sends them after jewels. I need some glasses. I need some rubies. Can you get these for me? So they do his bidding in typical fashion. And what they definitely do excel at, though, are puns. They have some fantastic puns. Including, a near miss deserves a couple of near missiles. And I'll make that hot rod even hotter. I guess they'll put a bra on that car or just burn it. So he sends the Stunticons on a mission to retrieve these items so that he could build a laser. Surprise! Every episode is some kind of laser. This one's a big one. This one's a really strong one. So he needs a ruby and he needs some kind of lens to help complete this machine that he's putting together. So the Autobots intercept the Stunticons and cleverly disguise themselves as the Stunticons. And what starts as a simple paint job somehow distorts their size, shape, and color in one fell swoop. And now they are these guys, and they're intercepting the mission. And together they form Menasor. And I guess that's one of the things that clues off Starscream to the fact that they don't seem exactly who they appear to be. Their voices are completely different. That's number one, and he picks up on that one right away. So they begin to test him. Starscream and Soundwave both kind of chime in. They've got special powers. They can transform into Menasor. They can shoot these certain types of blasters. I know for a fact Menasor has a birthmark on his external hard drive. Personal things. So, long story short, plan gets foiled. And the one thing I'm gleaming from this more than anything is that these stories, the more I reflect on them as an adult and watch them over again, they're really just unrequited love, friendship, and leadership stories from the perspective of Megatron, and his people just don't seem to care. The very first frame, Starscream is already undermining him. You fool, this will never work! He's just such a jerk, and at any point when the battle seems to not go their way, everyone just scatters and is like, you're on your own, man, see ya, and he's just left holding his ray gun, and it's kind of sad. It's just kind of sad.
And despite the ending being kind of sad, this episode does have a bit of a legacy. A lot of people love the fact that these Autobots combined, and we've come close to getting Autobot versions of these characters that could combine, using the Primords trilogy of the last few years from the Generations line. There is an Optimus body. There is a Mirage. There is a Jazz from Power of the Primes. However, there has not been a Sideswipe just yet. There has been a Sunstreaker. There's a Windcharger in that series of toys, but not one that can combine. But it also carries on a little further within the toy lines, as these Autobots and Decepticons tend to get swapped out for each other in terms of color scheme with toy design. So often a Mirage will be repainted into a drag strip or vice versa. Same goes for Jazz and Dead End, and Optimus and Motormaster. It's been done many times with, I think, just about all 5 of these. Yeah, Breakdown and Sideswipe as well. And that brings us to the season finale, the final episode of Generation 1, Season 2, Episode 49, overall Episode 65, B.O.T. That's B.O.T. It's an acronym, B.O.T. by Earl Kress. And for more on that, I'm going to toss it over to my buddy, Gabriel Owens, the salty Seaman.
The shackles of automata will shatter like their bones. 1-0-0-0-1-1-1-0-1-0-1.
Hey folks, Salty Seaman here, reviewing B.O.T. B.O.T. Couple of interesting points on this episode going in. Number one of the ones I remember from the very tail end of season 2 as a kid. Some of those episodes, I remember very clearly. Some I don't remember at all. Like Aerial Assault, I do not remember whatsoever. And of course, more important ones like War Dawn, both the Combaticon Origins episodes, one of which I've reviewed on my own channel. If you ever want to check out a military standpoint of Starscream's Brigade, go check out the Salty Seaman YouTube page. Anyway, but this one I definitely remember because I was a big Swindle fan, which he's also an Aerial Assault. But I don't think I either missed that as a kid and didn't see it as an adult, or I saw it once and it just didn't stick with me. But this one I do, and I definitely remember because of the Swindle aspect, really liking the episode. And it doesn't. If you talk about something that doesn't hold up, I think this is one of them. This is you could call this one of the worst episodes, if not the worst episode of G1. And a lot of people would disagree with you. A lot of people would even consider this in the running. But rewatch it and really pay attention. It's bad in a lot of ways. There used to be a BotCon. There was a crew of guys who would do Mystery Science Theater style of the episodes. They did the movie, and I remember one of them, M. Cypher, just one of the main writers. He did this episode, and it was he nearly lost his mind because he had to watch it over and over again to write the script, and it quickly became his least favorite episode of all time, and he would rant and rave back in the day to anyone who would listen to how bad this episode is. It's been a few years since I've last seen it. Also, of course, can't forget to mention it. It was the last episode of season 2, and the last episode of what a lot of people would call the golden era of G1. A lot of people who, that's their Transformers is the cartoon 84 to 85. So, yeah, in terms of going out that way, right before the movie hits and they completely change everything, it was a bad way for that era to go away. So we have the opening scene that establishes the rest of the plot, such as it is. So the Combaticons show up in robot mode. Okay, they're in downtown. Then Onslaught gives the order to transform. So they turn into vehicle mode. They are causing havoc and disruption because there's giant robots turning into cars going down the main street of whatever town we're in. And then Onslaught orders them to form Bruticus. Now, we're never given any idea what they were doing down there. There's never, were they stealing fuel? Are they trying to find some secret bit of technology? There was always a reason that they would be anywhere. We get no reason. We get a toy advertisement for Bruticus that we see all their modes. And then Defensor just kind of shows up out of nowhere. We've got no explanation for Defensor or the Protective Bots. The poor Protective Bots, in terms of fiction, have been one of the most screwed over of the first couple of years, especially all the other Scramble City combiners get some kind of origin cartoons and comics. Somehow the Protectobots missed both, and they both times they just kind of show up. I think they were maybe their stuff came in last minute, and they just didn't have time to set up an origin for them, so they're just there. You'll see in the next year's comics along with this episode. Not only that, they show up, blows Bruticus to bits, one shot. It's amazing. It's like this character they'd kind of been building up over the last few episodes as this, he's the new badass in town, blah, blah, blah. And now we got even a newer set of toys, characters, and he just takes him out in one shot. Oh, also, by the way, he's supposed to be he's a rescue team, not really a combat team. But they're an incredibly high power, firepower rescue team here. And again, no explanation who Defensor is. What's going on with him. He shows up and he walks away immediately, like almost Sentai style. And he tells them to call sanitation and clean up the mess. And we see Swindle pop out, and he's immediately worried, like, how am I going to get parts for my guys? And it's a horrible, bad opening. Earl Kress wrote this, and this looks. If you ask him if he was rushed to write this, he would probably tell you very. So we get our plot. Other than the Combaticons. And Megatron's going to blow up the moon, which only thing we just don't get him twirling a little mustache. Now this plot is ridiculous, impossible to control. Their plan to gather the energy. I don't see how this is going to work, and it's also very similar to what they already did in the Ultimate Doom. This is the laziest plot line and most basically one of the most recycled ideas. This is just such a lazily done episode. Not to mention, with a continuity error, it's like Swindle shows up to repair the rest of the Combaticons, and then he leaves having sold off a bunch of their important parts to this shady dictator guy. Couple questions. What does Swindle do with human money? Is that what he's getting paid in? Or fuel? Why does he care? He can kind of, even if he's on his own, he can kind of steal what he needs. And I know it's part of his character. He's the art of the deal guy. He's not really into the war stuff. That's cool and all, but it's like with Earthlings, it doesn't seem like people he really needs to barter with. And for what? We're not really made clear. And why did the deal change? And why don't we ever get a reason why? Just so much. It's just one of those episodes where it's just like, what is the point? Skywarp shows up to the Combaticons base, finds a bunch of parts, and he starts following the trail at Megatron's bequest, which implies Swindle went back to the Combaticon headquarters for some reason after the junkyard, after the first meeting, and then kept going. Okay, I'm definitely adding too much logic to this. It doesn't really make sense. Also, kind of an interesting little bit where Megatron kind of makes a division between Combaticons and Decepticons as if they're separate instead of a sub-faction. And they do that very inconsistently throughout the first couple seasons. I think in season 3 as well. The Insecticons kind of get that treatment at times. So that's kind of interesting. They also obviously have their second base. Of course, by season 3, anything to do with that would be dropped. They would just all be Decepticons, and not so much made of their subgroups. And I guess kudos to Swindle to being somewhat of a protect the environment guy. I don't know why he cares so much where the parts go. He put them in their proper place, a junkyard. While at the same time being incredibly clumsy, and their parts are just kind of scattering over. It's nothing. I understand Cypher's frustration more and more watching this. Is like, if you were to look at it, nothing in this episode makes sense at any turn. And we get a very cartoonishly fun little bit here. They grab Swindle, figure out what he's done. They're like, hey, no, we need. Obviously, Megatron doesn't care for the Combaticons, but apparently he appreciates using Bruticus' might. So he's like, no, I need Bruticus for this plan. He'd shown earlier the simulation of Bruticus raiding on Astro Train. Blowing up the moon. It's like a cowboy. I don't know. I said, nothing making sense here. So, speaking of not making sense, they're like, well, if you do not reassemble Bruticus in 15 hours, we're going to blow up your head. Which, if I remember the episode, they're not bluffing. That thing really will blow up his head, which, of course, would negate Bruticus as well, since Swindle's part of Bruticus. So it's kind of a self-defeating plan. Like, Megatron's just willing, if he can't meet a arbitrary deadline, he's willing just to throw away the idea of Bruticus altogether. I sleep on it. I don't know. Cut to a scene of Swindle stealing back parts, and we cut to a Middle Eastern area. Man, the latter half of season 2 really, really, really like just jumping on the. Given the time, the time it was written, that was like it is now in Middle East. It was in the news quite a bit. This is, it seemed to be a safe target, I guess, for television shows to pick on. And for whatever reason, Transformers just has a long history of 5-6 episodes. Of just this one's not as bad. At least it's not centric. But yeah, it would cause a cast member to leave the show. But we will get to that. Ant will get to that when that episode comes to us. Swindle also apparently sold to the Russians, and he's taking theirs back too. We confirm that they paid him in rubles. Again, what Swindle going to do with rubles, I don't know. But he comes back to Megatron's like, look, I got everyone together. Hey, look, we're cool. So all right, transform to Bruticus. Can't do it. You see, Swindle kind of. There's a problem about the most saving grace of this episode, I think, is this little bit. Still feeding into complete illogical fallacies, but it's still kind of funny. Swindle is obviously trying to hide the fact that Brawl is essentially just a remote control robot. He has no personality component, and they try to form Bruticus, and it's badly animated, but it's just a weird scene of like what happens when a combiner, a gestalt, cannot combine. So we kind of see that it's pretty funny, and of course he admits to Megatron he couldn't find Bruticus's personality component, which he just kind of says, I didn't think he'd need it, just implying Brawl's an idiot. It didn't occur to him he actually needed his brain, so to speak. So that whole bit's a little bit funny. I don't know if it saves the rest of this episode. So the episode cuts to a school where there is looks like a high school science class of some sort. A teacher is giving a demonstration on how a laser works. The laser goes off. It's obviously way overpowered for what he said it was. It turns out these science hooligans in the class have basically created a murder ray. If this thing was pointing in the wrong direction, could have killed dozens. So another fun part of this episode. Very briefly, if you're eagle-eyed or if you pause right at the when we see the entire class, you will see very briefly two model sheets straight from Jim and the holograms in the classroom, which just goes to feed my theory that Sunbow swiped. They went back and forth swiping model sheets from each other, no matter who was working on what. If you needed something, because it's all in the styles are all basically the same, which makes a lot of that interchangeable especially between Joe, Transformers, and Jim. They all seem to be kind of in the same style-ish. And as an earlier episode I reviewed, where it's a season 2 episode where one of the reporters is just absolutely season 3 Spike. The teacher / professor for this class, by the way, is very obviously Bumblebee's voice actor, and it's one of those things. Even as a kid, if you were like maybe not even paying attention, you heard him, you would think like, "Oh, that's Bumblebee talking," and you look over and no, it's some random human. As the two boys get their assignment for to basically pass the course, or due to their screw up, it's typical high school, college plot, whatever. We see the first of what turns out to be foreshadowing. The school has enormous doors. I mean, this is just a science classroom at a school, and it looks like a 20-foot high door. No, this is not an animation error. This is required by the plot, as we'll get to. So it leads to the two boys leave. They meet up with some girl. This feels like a sneaked in plot for a pilot that maybe Chris was writing for a spinoff. I don't know with these three, but they just happen to go by a giant high-rise fire, and now we get to see the Protectobots in action. This is the selling point. This is their selling point for their toys. We get some action with First Aid, basically ripping off the Lifeline character from G.I. Joe. Both will be made at the same time with the same character arc. Regardless, getting ahead of myself, but they would get a little bit more in season 3, basically. But here this is like, hey, we've shown you Defensor, we've shown you the toys. Look, they're cool rescue guys. First Aid at one point catches people falling out of a building hundreds of stories down in his arms. So, like Ant mentioned last episode, I guess Autobots have some really soft exteriors, which at the velocity they catch humans at times. So for their makeup science project, the kids go to the junkyard, grab a bunch of parts, which is where they're going to get Brawl's personality component. So thank God Swindle cared about putting things in their proper place and not littering, even when he was littering, and sent their stuff to the dump where the kids could easily find it. The leaps of logic to make this episode work are quite ingenious. We also get a overly long explanation of what B.O.T stands for, Biotronic Operational Telecommunicator, if you must know. So the kids are fiddling around trying to build this bot robot. And then they said, "Hey, I got weird meter readings off this thing we've got. Let's try installing it." This makes total sense. So this is basically where Brawn's personality component gets installed in this. Speaking of the exterior of the robot, is a very kind of 50s, 60s-ish, evil robot kind of design. Of course, matches when they put Brawl's personality component in. Of course, Brawl being a lout, a violent hooligan, starts immediately trashing the lab, knocks over some chemicals at the commercial break, which causes a giant explosion as a chemistry sets and schools usually do. So B.O.T escapes, aka Brawl, out of the school, punching giant holes through it. The kid's like, "Oh, what? Well, what are we gonna do? We need to catch him." He's like, "Oh, let's call the Protectobots," and they basically do a 80s phone modem hack and send out a distress signal, which the Autobots hear at Autobot headquarters. And We also see Swindle going looking for Brawl's personality component at the junkyard. Gets immediate exposition. Maybe those kids took it. He says, "You better hope so," and he leaves and kind of, passive aggressively throws over a piece of junk. I don't know. We don't know if he's like, well, what kids did he give them the address of these weird random kids that showed up? It's never explained how he knows what kids he's talking about and exactly where to get them. But moving on. So we have Ironhide, Gears, and Bumblebee. A nice little trio of OG G1 84 guys showing up here in the last episode of season 2. Whereas David mentioned on his review last episode, we don't get a lot of a focus on any 84 guys this late in the season. We get these 3 who are, so you're not the Protectobots. They're very disappointed to meet Autobots who have supposedly been heroes of this planet. Don't even recognize them. They're looking for the Protectobots. Who are you scrubs? They're like, hey, we're all on the same team here. They're like, oh, okay, I guess that's okay. It's just another layer of needless exposition or dialogue. And it's B.O.T. So the Autobots enter the school and proceed to try to contain B.O.T, but have little success. And now we see why in the earlier shots, which I think are inconsistent. I think they shrink. The doors do shrink in and out depending on who's in the scene. But this in order for this episode to work, the doors have to be 20 feet tall because Ironhide, it has to be able to pass through it. And there's a lot of animated cheating on it here and there. But it's you look at it and think about it, it's really, really ridiculous. As the Autobots chase B.O.T up this never-ending flight of fantasy stairs, large enough for 3 Autobots to walk up nearly abreast of each other, Ironhide gives the great leadership command of just start firing wildly up ahead of you with your advanced robot weapons. Surely this cannot lead to anything bad. And, I mean, gosh darn it, the human-created robot up there is annoying me. So we end up with a very confusing fight. Swindle somehow is ahead of the Autobots at one point. There's a fight, and they leave, and Swindle leaves. The kids and the trio of Autobots are standing there. The Autobots have to explain what Decepticons and Combaticons are, and it's like, again, it's been like 2 years of these alien robots roaming the planet. The Autobots have to keep explaining to humans who apparently do not pay any attention to the world around them what Autobots and Decepticons are. Swindle returns with Brawn's personality component. The Combaticons are once again whole. Megatron presumably deactivates the bomb, threatens Swindle with his life if he ever does it again. Finally, we get Bruticus combined. He takes off. Back to the kids, who decided they're going to track down that personality component that they figured out must have belonged to the Combaticons, aka Swindle, and they take off. They kill Cliff Jumper, it looks like, scalp him, and then take his carcass into as they're homing in on the signal. I'm just kidding. They have like a very Cliff Jumper-ish looking car with no top. And through some very ridiculous reverse the polarity scientific gobbledygook, the kids manage to listen in on the Decepticons' nefarious plan as their test run for blowing up the moon. Again, Megatron's twirling his mustache. They're going to first test it on the Autobot headquarters, aka the Ark, and the kids have to go warn them. So the kids, of course, tell the Autobots, and it leads to a big fight outside Autobot headquarters. We can see a lot of some good action if that's what you're into. A little bit of wheeljack porn here for Ant. No, he likes that part of the episode if nothing else. And the battle continues. The Protectobots perform Defensor, who has a pretty cool power. He has a protection force field that's like nearly impenetrable. The Autobots hide in there with him. Makes sense. Defensor is a defensive B.O.T, even though we also saw his thirst for blood knows no bounds from the beginning of the episode. But he forms a protective shield. The kids figure out they can still remote control their bot, and are going to send him out to help the Autobots and control a gun mount. And finally, we're led to a sequence that makes literal no sense. Of Bruticus takes control of the battery gun, shoots Defensor. He's knocked down into his component parts, and but then the gun starts firing wildly for no reason that we can see, as we're shown Bruticus firing the gun many times, but then it suddenly goes crazy, and then we see the monitor where the kids are watching it, and where they sent B.O.T. B.O.T was there the entire time, messing with the control panel at the feet, even though we don't see it till just now. It makes no sense. And the Decepticons finally retreat. I guess they gave up on their moon plan. It's never made clear. And the Autobots thank the kids, and then the kids are like, well, it's great, and we want to, maybe we get some more spare parts. But then they have to suddenly leave as they tape up the girl's mouth because they are late for a BDSM party, and they're trying to get ready before the time to open the doors are, I suppose. I don't know. This episode is a mess. I have gone very, very long. It's just I didn't cover everything in this one, but in terms of if you are a person who feels the golden age is 84 to 85, that's your Transformers. Man, this was a bad note to go out on. Just, toy advertisements are one thing. This was blatant toy adverts with very, very poor storytelling, animation. This was obviously, we need one more episode, and it was done slapshod in a hurry. It's what a way to go here, end of season 2, end of 85. Back to you, Ant.
And of course, you can catch Gabe on his YouTube channel, The Salty Sea Man, over at youtube.com/recharge138. It is sad that the season 2, the long season 2, goes out on such a bad episode. There are a few things worth mentioning. Some of it's just kind of fun. But yeah, this episode's pretty irredeemable. But just to make a few notes, this is the first appearance of Defensor, the combined form of the Protectobots. We did not see them combine in Revenge of Bruticus. Only their individual modes. The two humans in this episode are named Roland and Martin, as in Roland and Martin's Laugh-In, a very long-running TV show in the 60s and 70s, and one of those kids was voiced by Townsend Coleman, who you may know better as the original Michelangelo on Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, or as the original Tick from the cartoon of the same name. Now, in other references to other bits of television, the high school these kids attend is not named after Benjamin Franklin, nor is it named after President Franklin Pierce. It is named after Benjamin Franklin Pierce.
I've got a distress signal. It's coming from a one-level brick structure with the inscription Benjamin Franklin Pierce High School.
And for those of you who know your TV and movie history, that would be Benjamin Franklin Pierce, a.k.a. Hawkeye Pierce, the main character in the TV series and the film from which the TV series derived, called MASH. And that is the type of episode B.O.T was.
I'd say that about wraps it up.
And that will wrap things up for season 2 of the Transformers cartoon. And we're almost out of 1986. And I'll explain that more in just a second. But if you like this show, please subscribe and review us wherever you listen to the show. If it's on YouTube, if it's on Google Play, Stitcher, wherever you listen to us, please give us a 5-star review and subscribe. Of course, if you're not subscribed to our YouTube channel, what are you waiting for? YouTube.com/TFU.INFO. That's YouTube.com/TFU.INFO. This show appears there as well as lots of other fun stuff, and I'm hoping to get a few new toy reviews up before the end of 2018. Now, if you want to get back to the show, there's a couple ways you can do it. I will give you the quickest and easiest way. That is join our Patreon. It's patreon.com/TFU.INFO. That's patreon.com/TFU.INFO. For as little as $1 a month, you can hear this show a day early. As we try to reach our goal of 25 patrons, and we are at 15 patrons right now. So if we can get to 25, I'm going to go back and start redoing some of these podcast episodes as full video episodes. So you'll be able to watch just about everything we talk about in the episodes with some visual help along the way. Of course, if that's not your thing, I totally understand. You can help us out one other way. Your Christmas shopping, doing your holiday shopping right now, use our Amazon links. TFU.INFO/Amazon. Anything you do from there on out, Amazon will send a little bit of change our way for anything that you buy. And that definitely goes to help us out here at TFU.INFO. Of course, keep an eye on the website, www.tfu.info. I'm working on some more of the upgrades to the toy archive. Making my way through the year 2000 through Beast Machines and Robots in Disguise. If you're familiar with those lines, go check it out. We're going to have some nice updates there soon. And of course, if you want to reach out to me, the best way to do it is on Twitter, twitter.com/TFU_info or at TFU_info. You can also catch us on Facebook and Instagram. And you can always shoot me an email at info@tfu.info. So, next time on the show, we are going to wrap up 1985. Hallelujah. It's been a lot of episodes about 1985, the first big heyday of Transformers, and we're going to get ready to go into 1986, the movie, the toy line, and everything else that came with it. The big seismic shift in the Transformers brand happens in 1986, and you do not want to miss it. So until next time, I am Anthony Bricali, host of this show, owner, operator, madman behind TFU.info. See ya.